Luke's voice cracked as he stood in the middle of Silver Creek's main street, blood dripping from his knuckles, facing the crowd that had gathered. "You want the truth? I married her for debt. For land I'd never own. For all the wrong reasons." Eliza's face went white beside him, but he kept going. "And somewhere between the barn I slept in and the woman I didn't deserve, I fell in love with my own wife. So mock her if you want. Call her what you've always called her. But know this. She's worth 10 of any of us, and I'll fight every last one of you to prove it." The silence that followed was deafening. Before we continue this story, please subscribe to our channel and follow along to see how this ends. Comment below with your city so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. Before we continue this story, please subscribe to our channel and follow along to see how this ends. Comment below with your city so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. The marriage certificate felt like a noose around Luke's neck. He walked out of the church 3 steps ahead of his new wife, refusing to look back at her. The afternoon sun hit him hard, but not as hard as the shame burning through his chest. Behind him, he heard Eliza's footsteps, quiet, hesitant, like she was apologizing just by existing. "Well, well," a voice called from across the street. "If it ain't the happy couple." Luke's jaw clenched. Marcus Webb stood outside the saloon, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. Half the town seemed to have gathered there, watching the spectacle like it was Sunday entertainment. "Congratulations, Callahan!" another man shouted. "Heard you got yourself a real prize!" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Luke's hands curled into fists, but Eliza's voice stopped him cold. "Let's just go home." Her words were so quiet he almost didn't hear them. Almost. He turned to look at her for the first time since they'd said their vows. She stood there in that ridiculous dress, her brown hair pulled back too tight, her eyes fixed on the ground. She looked like she wanted to disappear. "Home," Luke repeated, the word tasting bitter. "Right." They walked to the wagon in silence. Luke climbed up first, then waited. Eliza stood beside the wheel, clearly uncertain whether he'd offer his hand or not. He didn't. She pulled herself up awkwardly, settling on the far edge of the seat, as far from him as possible. Luke snapped the reins harder than necessary, and the horses lurched forward. They left Silver Creek behind them, but the laughter followed. The Harper farm sat 5 miles outside town, a modest spread with a small house, a sagging barn, and fields that looked like they'd been fighting a losing battle for years. Luke had seen it once before, the day the banker had laid out the terms of the deal. "Her father left the land to her," John Garrett had said, leaning back in his leather chair like a king on a throne. "But there's a clause. She inherits everything only if she marries within 6 months of his death. Old man Harper didn't trust a woman to run a farm alone." "What's that got to do with me?" Luke had asked, though he already knew. "You owe me $3,000, Callahan. Money you don't have. I could take your horse, your gear, everything you own, and you'd still owe me. Or," Garrett had smiled then, cold and calculating, "you marry Eliza Harper, I forgive the debt, and you get access to some of the richest farmland in the valley. Simple business." She know about this arrangement? She knows she needs to marry. She knows you need money. That's enough. It wasn't enough. Not even close. But Luke had signed the papers anyway, because the alternative was losing everything he'd worked 10 years to build. Now, sitting beside the woman who was legally his wife, Luke felt like he'd lost something far worse than money. Eliza broke the silence first. "There's a spare room in the barn," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "It has a bed, clean blankets. You can stay there if you prefer." Luke glanced at her. "You offering or assuming?" "I'm not assuming anything, Mr. Callahan. I'm just being practical." It's Luke. I know your name. Then use it. Eliza's hands tightened on her lap, her knuckles going white. Fine. Luke. The barn has a room. You're welcome to it. Appreciated. They didn't speak again until they reached the house. Luke carried his bedroll and saddlebags to the barn without being asked. The space was cleaner than he'd expected. Organized, well-maintained, with tools hung properly and hay stacked neat. The spare room Eliza mentioned was barely bigger than a closet, but it had a real bed frame and a window that actually opened. He dropped his gear and stood there, staring at the narrow bed. This was his life now, married to a woman he didn't know, living in a barn, all because he'd been stupid enough to trust the wrong people with money he didn't have. Supper's at 6, Eliza's voice came from the doorway. If you're hungry. Luke turned. She stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, still wearing that awful borrowed dress. In the dim light of the barn, she looked smaller than she had in church. Tired. I'll find something in town, he said. There's plenty of food here. I said I'll find something in town. Eliza's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Hurt, maybe, or just resignation. She nodded once and turned to leave. Eliza. She stopped, but didn't look back. This arrangement, Luke said, forcing the words out. It doesn't have to be more complicated than it is. We both got our reasons for doing this. We don't need to pretend it's something it ain't. I'm not pretending anything, Eliza said quietly. I never have been. She walked away before he could respond. Luke stayed away from the house that first night. He rode back into Silver Creek, tied his horse outside the saloon, and pushed through the doors looking for whiskey and silence. He got neither. Look who's here, Marcus Webb called from a corner table. The married man. Luke ignored him and headed for the bar. What'll it be? The bartender asked, his expression carefully blank. Whiskey. Leave the bottle. The bartender poured, but his eyes flicked toward the corner where Marcus sat with 3 other men. Luke felt their stares like knives in his back. He downed the first glass and poured another. Must be hard, Marcus said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Being tied to a woman like that. Luke's hand tightened on the glass. I mean, she's what, 32, 33, and never been married before? Makes a man wonder what's wrong with her. Marcus, shut your mouth, the bartender warned. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Poor Callahan here probably drew the short straw. Only way a woman like Eliza Harper gets a husband is if someone's desperate enough to. Luke moved fast. 1 second he was at the bar. The next he had Marcus by the collar, slamming him against the wall hard enough to rattle the paintings. Say her name again, Luke growled. Go ahead. Marcus's eyes went wide, but his smirk didn't fade. Touchy, ain't we? For a man who married her for land? Luke's fist pulled back, ready to break that smirk permanently. Callahan! The bartender's voice cut through the rage. Not in here. You want to fight? Take it outside. Luke held Marcus there for another long second, then shoved him away hard. Marcus stumbled, but caught himself, laughing. Guess she means something to you after all, Marcus said. Or maybe you're just mad because everyone knows the truth. Luke grabbed the whiskey bottle off the bar and walked out. He rode back to the Harper farm in darkness, the bottle half empty and his knuckles aching from where they'd connected with the wall instead of Marcus's face. The house was dark when he arrived. He unsaddled his horse, put the animal away properly, and headed for the barn room. But as he passed the kitchen window, he saw a flicker of light inside. Eliza sat at the table, a single candle burning beside her. She had a book open in front of her, but she wasn't reading. She was just sitting there, staring at nothing. Luke stood in the shadows, watching her. She looked lonely. The thought hit him harder than it should have. He pushed it away, stumbled into the barn, and fell onto the narrow bed, fully clothed. Morning came too early and too bright. Luke woke to the sound of hammering. He dragged himself outside, squinting against the sun, and found Eliza on the north fence line, driving new posts into the ground with methodical precision. She'd changed out of the wedding dress into work clothes, men's pants, a faded shirt, boots worn smooth at the heels. Her hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and sweat already dampened her collar. Luke checked his pocket watch. Not even 6 o'clock. He walked over slowly, his head pounding from last night's whiskey. "Fence been broken long?" he asked. Eliza jumped, nearly dropping the hammer. She turned, her face flushed from exertion. "Few weeks," she said. "Cattle kept getting through." "You're fixing it alone?" "No one else to do it." Luke looked at the fence line. She'd already replaced 4 posts and was working on the 5th. Good, solid work. Better than some ranch hands he'd known. "I can help," he heard himself say. Eliza's eyes narrowed slightly. "You don't have to." "I know." They worked in silence for the next hour. Luke took over the post driving, while Eliza stretched the wire tight. They fell into an efficient rhythm without discussing it. Him driving, her securing. Both of them moving down the line with practiced ease. When they finished, the sun had fully risen. "Thank you," Eliza said, wiping her forehead with her sleeve. "It's your land," Luke replied. "Our land, I guess. Legally." "Is that what Garrett told you? That you'd get half?" Luke went still. "What?" "The banker." Eliza's voice was carefully controlled. "When he proposed this arrangement, did he tell you that you'd own half the farm?" "He said I'd have access." "Access isn't ownership, Luke. My father's will is very specific. The land stays in my name whether I marry or not. Marriage just determines whether I keep it or the bank takes it." Luke stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying John Garrett lied to you. Whatever he promised you, half the farm, a share of the profits, partnership, none of it's legally binding. You married me for nothing." The words hit like a physical blow. "You knew?" Luke's voice came out rough. "You knew and you didn't say anything?" "I found out 3 days ago. I tried to tell you before the wedding, but you wouldn't talk to me. And then—" Eliza's voice wavered slightly. "Then we were standing in front of the preacher, and it was too late." Luke turned away, his hands clenching and unclenching. "You could have walked away," Eliza continued quietly. "You still can. The debt Garrett holds, it's not legal. He manipulated both of us." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I won't have a marriage built on lies, even if it's just a business arrangement." Luke let out a harsh laugh. "Business arrangement. That's what you call this?" "What would you call it?" He didn't have an answer. Eliza picked up the hammer and started walking back toward the barn. Halfway there, she stopped and turned. "For what it's worth," she said, "I didn't want this either. But we're here now, so we can either make it work or we can make each other miserable. Your choice." She left him standing there, the morning sun beating down, the truth settling over him like dust. Luke spent the rest of the day away from the farm, riding the property lines, checking water sources, doing anything to avoid going back to that barn room. But as evening approached, his stomach growled loud enough to make the decision for him. He found Eliza in the kitchen, cooking over the wood stove. "I made extra," she said without turning around, "if you're interested." The smell of beef stew hit him hard. When was the last time he'd had a real meal? "I'll wash up first," he said. When he returned, she'd set 2 places at the table. They sat across from each other, the silence heavy between them. The stew was good, better than good. Luke ate 2 bowls before he realized he was being rude. "This is," he struggled for words. "It's real good." "My mother's recipe," Eliza said. "She taught me before she passed." "How long ago?" 15 years. I was 17. Luke did the math. She'd been running this house, caring for her father, managing the farm, all of it, since she was 17 years old. "That's young," he said. "Had to grow up fast." Eliza pushed food around her plate. "My father wasn't well after she died. He tried, but the grief took him different. I learned to handle things. The town doesn't see that. The town sees what it wants to see." Her voice was matter-of-fact, no bitterness. "I stopped caring about their opinion years ago." "Then why marry? If you didn't care what they thought, why not just let the bank take the land?" Eliza looked up, and for the first time, Luke saw real fire in her eyes. "Because this farm is mine. My mother's buried here. My father spent his whole life building this place. I'm not letting John Garrett take it just because the law thinks a woman can't run a farm alone." "So you married the first desperate man who came along?" "I married the only man Garrett would approve. He chose you, Luke, not me." The words stung because they were true. "What happens now?" Luke asked. "That's up to you. Like I said this morning, you can stay or you can go. The marriage is legal either way. The land stays mine either way. Garrett can't touch it now." "And you'd just let me walk away?" "I'd rather you stayed." Eliza's honesty caught him off guard. "This farm needs work. 2 people can do more than one. But I won't keep you here if you don't want to be here." Luke looked at her. Really looked at her. Not the old maid the town talked about. Not the woman in the too big dress. Just Eliza Harper, sitting across from him, offering him a choice. "I'll stay," he said slowly. "For now. We'll figure out the rest as we go." Something like relief crossed Eliza's face, but she masked it quickly. "All right then," she said. "Welcome home, I guess." It wasn't much, but it was a start. 3 days passed in careful, awkward coexistence. Luke worked the farm from dawn to dusk, repairing fences, clearing irrigation ditches, mucking out the barn. Eliza worked alongside him when she wasn't managing the house, cooking, or dealing with the small vegetable garden that fed them both. They spoke only when necessary, short, practical exchanges about work that needed doing. But Luke noticed things. He noticed how Eliza woke before him every morning, coffee already brewing by the time he stumbled out of the barn. He noticed how she handled the difficult mare in the pasture, patient, gentle, never forcing. He noticed the small basket she packed every Wednesday afternoon, food wrapped carefully, and how she'd ride into town and come back empty-handed. On the 4th day, curiosity got the better of him. "Where do you go on Wednesdays?" he asked over supper. Eliza's fork paused. "The widow Morrison. She's got 3 children, and her husband died last winter. I bring her food when I can." "The town know you do that?" "I don't do it for the town to know." Luke absorbed that. "Anyone else?" "Old Mr. Peterson gets bread every Sunday. The Harper boy, no relation, he broke his leg last month. His mother's struggling. I help when I can." "You feed half the county?" "I feed the people who need feeding." Eliza met his eyes. "That surprise you?" "Yeah," Luke admitted. "Yeah, it does." "Why?" "Because the town acts like you're—" He stopped himself. "Like I'm what? Worthless? Unwanted? Too plain to matter?" Eliza's voice didn't rise, but it cut deep. "I know what they say, Luke. I've heard it all. doesn't change who I am or what I do." Luke set down his fork. "They're wrong about you." "Took you almost a week to figure that out?" "I'm a slow learner." Something almost like a smile touched Eliza's lips. "At least you're honest about it." That night, Luke lay in the barn room, staring at the ceiling. He'd come here expecting a business transaction, a temporary arrangement, a way out of debt and nothing more. But Eliza Harper wasn't what he'd expected, not even close. And that terrified him more than any debt ever could. Sunday came, and with it, the expectation of church. Luke hadn't set foot in a church since his mother died, but Eliza appeared at the barn door at 8 sharp, dressed in her one good dress, the same one she'd worn to their wedding. "You coming?" she asked. "Not particularly inclined to," Luke said. "People will talk if you don't." "People talk anyway." "Fair point," Eliza hesitated. "I'm going regardless. You're welcome to join me." She left before he could respond. Luke tried to ignore the nagging feeling in his gut. He lasted about 20 minutes before saddling his horse and riding after her. He caught up to her wagon halfway to town. "Changed your mind?" Eliza asked as he fell into pace beside her. "Figured I'd better show my face. Confirm everyone's worst opinions." "That's the spirit." They arrived at the church to scattered stares and whispered conversations that stopped mid-sentence when they walked through the door. Luke felt every eye on them as they slid into a back pew. The service dragged on forever. Luke barely heard a word of the sermon. He was too focused on the way people kept glancing back at them, then leaning toward their neighbors, lips moving in silent gossip. But Eliza sat straight-backed and calm, her hands folded in her lap, her expression serene. She'd been enduring this for years, Luke realized. This constant judgment, this mockery disguised as concern. And she'd never flinched. After the service, the congregation filed out into the churchyard. Luke started toward the wagon, but Eliza's hand on his arm stopped him. "Mrs. Morrison," she called out. A thin woman with 3 small children clinging to her skirts turned, surprise crossing her face. "Eliza," she said warmly, "how are you?" "Well enough. I wanted to introduce my husband. Luke, this is Sarah Morrison." "Ma'am," Luke said, tipping his hat. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Callahan. Eliza's mentioned you." "She has?" Sarah smiled. "Said you'd been helping fix up the farm. It's good she's not doing everything alone anymore." Other women began to gather, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. The widow Peterson, Mary Chen, whose husband ran the general store, Alice Thompson, the school teacher. One by one, they greeted Eliza with genuine warmth. Luke stood there, stunned, as he realized the truth. The town might have mocked her, but the women, the ones who actually knew her, they respected her. "Your wife's a blessing," Mrs. Peterson said quietly to Luke, while Eliza chatted with the children. "Don't know what some of us would have done without her these past years." "She's something, all right," Luke heard himself say. And he meant it. They were halfway home when Eliza finally spoke. "Thank you for coming today." "Wasn't so bad," Luke said. "You look like you wanted to punch half the congregation." "Only half?" He glanced at her. "I must be getting soft." Eliza actually laughed, a short, surprised sound that caught them both off guard. "Was that a joke, Luke Callahan?" "Might have been. Don't tell anyone. Bad for my reputation." "Your secret's safe with me." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. That night, Luke didn't head straight to the barn after supper. Instead, he lingered at the table while Eliza washed dishes. "You need help with that?" he asked. "I've been washing dishes alone for 15 years. I think I can manage." "I'm aware you can manage. I asked if you needed help." Eliza turned, studying him with those sharp eyes. "You feeling all right?" "Just trying to be neighborly." "We're married, Luke. I think we're past neighborly. What would you call it then? She considered that. Partners, maybe. Business partners who happen to share a property. That what you want? A business partnership? I want what's real, Eliza said quietly. I've had enough of people pretending. If this is a business arrangement, I can live with that. If it's something else someday, I can live with that too. But I won't live with lies. Luke stood up and moved to the sink. He picked up a dish towel and started drying the plates she'd washed. They worked side by side in silence, and somehow it felt like the most honest conversation they'd had yet. 2 weeks passed before Luke realized he'd stopped sleeping in the barn. It happened gradually. First, just staying later at the kitchen table, talking with Eliza about crops and weather, and nothing important. Then falling asleep in the chair by the fire. Then waking up with a blanket draped over him that he hadn't put there himself. The third time it happened, Eliza stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. "There's a perfectly good bed upstairs," she said. "Guest room. If you're going to sleep in the house anyway, might as well be comfortable." Luke rubbed his neck, stiff from the chair. "You sure?" "I wouldn't offer if I wasn't." He moved his things that afternoon. The guest room was small but clean, with a real mattress and windows that caught the morning light. It felt strange, being inside the house. Domestic. Like they were actually married instead of just legally bound. That night at supper, Eliza seemed nervous. "Something on your mind?" Luke asked. "Town meeting tomorrow night. At the church. They're discussing the new railroad route." "So?" "So everyone will be there, including John Garrett." Luke's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "You want to skip it?" "I want to go, but—" Eliza hesitated. "People will talk. About us. About whether the marriage is real or just a legal arrangement." "Let them talk." "It's not that simple, Luke. If Garrett thinks this marriage is a sham, he could challenge it. Find some legal loophole. Take the farm anyway." "On what grounds?" "That it's fraudulent. That we're not truly married in the eyes of the law." Eliza's voice dropped. "We sleep in separate rooms. We barely touch. Anyone with eyes can see we're strangers living under the same roof." Luke set down his fork carefully. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we need to look convincing. Tomorrow night, at the meeting." "Convincing how?" Eliza's cheeks flushed. "Like a real married couple. Like we actually chose this." The air between them suddenly felt thick. "And after tomorrow night?" Luke asked quietly. "After tomorrow night, we go back to whatever this is. But for a few hours, we need to make them believe." Luke studied her face, looking for any sign this was more than strategy. He found nothing. "All right," he said. "We'll make them believe." The church was packed when they arrived. Luke helped Eliza down from the wagon, his hand lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. She stiffened slightly, then relaxed into it. Playing the part already. "Remember," she whispered as they walked toward the door, "we're newlyweds who actually like each other." "That's a stretch," Luke said, but he smiled when he said it. Eliza's lips twitched. "Try not to scowl at everyone." "I don't scowl." "You absolutely scowl." They stepped inside, and conversation died. Every head turned, every eye assessed. Luke felt Eliza's hand tighten on his arm. "Evening, folks," he said, loud and clear. "Mind if we grab a seat?" No one answered. They just stared. Then John Garrett stood from the front row, his smile sharp as a knife. "Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, how lovely to see you both. Please, sit anywhere you'd like." The way he said Mrs. Callahan dripped with skepticism. Luke guided Eliza to a middle pew, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. He draped his arm across the back of the bench behind her. Casual, possessive, deliberate. Eliza's breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. The meeting started. The mayor droned on about railroad proposals and land assessments and property values. Luke heard none of it. He was too aware of Eliza beside him, warm and tense, pretending this was normal. Halfway through, she shifted slightly, and her hand landed on his knee. Luke's entire body went rigid. Eliza's eyes stayed forward, her expression calm, but her fingers pressed into his leg like an anchor. "Easy," she murmured, so quiet only he could hear. "You look like you're about to bolt." "Not used to this," he muttered back. "Neither am I, but Garrett's watching." Luke glanced forward. Sure enough, the banker sat 3 rows ahead, half-turned in his seat, eyes fixed on them with calculating interest. Luke covered Eliza's hand with his own. Her fingers went still. "Better?" he asked softly. "Better," she confirmed. They sat like that for the rest of the meeting, hands entwined, shoulders touching, looking for all the world like a couple who belonged together. When it ended, people filed out slowly, clustering in groups, whispering. Luke stood first, offering Eliza his hand. She took it, and they walked down the aisle together. John Garrett intercepted them at the door. "Mrs. Harper, excuse me, Mrs. Callahan. How are you adjusting to married life?" "Very well, Mr. Garrett. Thank you for asking." "And the farm? Everything running smoothly?" "Better than ever," Eliza said. "Having help makes all the difference." Garrett's eyes shifted to Luke. "I'm sure it does. Tell me, Callahan, how are you finding farm work? Quite different from cowboying, I imagine." "Different," Luke agreed, "but satisfying. Building something that lasts." "How permanent of you." Garrett's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I do hope this arrangement works out, for both your sakes." "It's not an arrangement," Luke said, his voice hardening. "It's a marriage." "Of course. My apologies." Garrett tipped his hat. "Do give my regards to your lovely wife." He walked away, leaving poison in his wake. Eliza's hand trembled in Luke's grip. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows it's not real." "He suspects. That's different." "Is it?" Luke didn't have an answer. They rode home in heavy silence. But when they reached the farm, neither of them moved to get down from the wagon. "Thank you," Eliza said finally. "For tonight. For playing along." "Wasn't playing." She turned to look at him. "What?" "I wasn't playing along, Eliza. I was—" Luke struggled for words. "I was being your husband. Because that's what I am. On paper, at least." "On paper," Eliza repeated, her voice hollow. "Yeah." She climbed down from the wagon without another word. Luke sat there, watching her walk into the house, and realized he'd just lied. Because somewhere in the last 2 weeks, this had stopped being just on paper, and he had no idea what to do about it. 3 days later, Luke rode into town for supplies. He was loading feed sacks onto the wagon when Marcus Webb appeared, flanked by 2 other men Luke recognized from the saloon. "Heard you caused quite a stir at the meeting," Marcus said. Luke didn't look up. "That right? Playing house with the old Maid. Must be quite the performance. You got something to say? Say it." Marcus leaned against the wagon. "Just wondering how long you plan to keep up the act. Everyone knows Garrett forced you into this. You think holding her hand at church meetings makes it real?" Luke straightened slowly. "You finished?" "Not even close. See, me and the boys, we got a bet going. How long before you get tired of pretending and leave her high and dry. I give it another month. Thompson here says 2 weeks. The other man laughed. She probably doesn't even let him touch her. What kind of marriage is that? Luke's vision went red. He moved fast, slamming Marcus against the wagon hard enough to rattle the wood. Say another word about my wife, Luke growled, his forearm pressed against Marcus's throat. Go ahead. I'm begging you. Marcus's eyes widened, but his smirk remained. Hit a nerve, did I? Luke! A woman's voice cut through the haze. He turned his head to find Sarah Morrison standing there, her youngest child on her hip. Mrs. Morrison, Luke said, not releasing Marcus. Let him go, Sarah said calmly. He's not worth it. Luke held Marcus for another beat, then shoved him away, hard. Marcus stumbled, coughing. You're crazy, Marcus spat. Getting all worked up over a woman who doesn't even finish that sentence and you'll be eating through a straw, Luke interrupted. We clear? Marcus backed away, his friends following. You're going to regret this, Callahan. They disappeared down the street. Sarah approached slowly. You all right? Fine. That was quite a display. He insulted Eliza. I heard. Sarah shifted the child to her other hip. You know, when Eliza first told me she was getting married, I worried. Worried it was just about the farm. Worried she'd end up more alone than before. Why are you telling me this? Because I was wrong. Sarah smiled. The way you just defended her? That's not pretend, Luke. That's real. Luke's chest tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Sarah's eyes were knowing. I've watched people in this town for 20 years. I know the difference between obligation and care. You care about her. She's my wife. Exactly. Sarah started to walk away, then paused. Whatever Garrett told you, whatever reasons you had for marrying her, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what you do now. Don't waste it. She left him standing there, her words echoing. Luke finished loading the wagon in silence, his hands shaking. On the ride home, he replayed the confrontation over and over. The rage that had consumed him when Marcus spoke about Eliza. The need to defend her, protect her, make them understand she was worth 10 of any of them. When had that happened? When had she stopped being the woman he'd married out of desperation and become someone he'd fight for? He pulled up to the farmhouse to find Eliza in the garden, pulling weeds. She looked up, smiling. Get everything? Yeah, all of it. You look upset. Something happened in town? Luke climbed down from the wagon, trying to decide how much to tell her. Ran into Marcus Webb. Eliza's smile faded. What did he say? Doesn't matter. Luke, I said it doesn't matter. The words came out harsher than he intended. Eliza flinched. Luke cursed under his breath, running a hand through his hair. Sorry, I didn't mean to. He just got under my skin. What did he say about me? What does he always say? Same garbage everyone in this town spews. And you defended me. It wasn't a question. Luke met her eyes. Of course I did. Why? Because you're my wife. On paper, Eliza said, throwing his own words back at him. That's not... Luke stopped, frustration building. You think I don't know the difference? You think I can't tell what's real and what's an act? I don't know what you think anymore, Luke. 1 minute you're keeping your distance, the next you're ready to fight half the town for my honor. Which one is real? Both. Neither. I don't... He broke off, his chest heaving. Eliza stood very still. What are you trying to say? I'm saying I didn't expect this, Luke said, the words tumbling out. "I didn't expect you. I thought I was marrying someone I could ignore, someone who'd stay out of my way. But you're not that person. You're kind and strong, and you take care of everyone but yourself, and I can't—" He stopped himself, realizing what he was about to admit. "Can't what?" Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. Luke looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman who woke before dawn to feed him, who taught him about the farm with patience he didn't deserve, who'd been mocked and rejected by this town her whole life and still found ways to help the people who hurt her. "I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter to me," he said quietly. "That you don't matter to me." The silence stretched between them like a live wire. Then Eliza turned away. "Don't. Don't what? Don't say things you don't mean. Don't make this more complicated than it already is." "I'm not—" "Yes, you are!" Eliza spun back, and for the first time, Luke saw tears in her eyes. "You're saying what you think I want to hear, because Marcus Webb got in your head, and Sarah Morrison probably said something kind, and now you feel guilty. But guilt isn't the same as—" She stopped herself. "The same as what?" Luke pressed. "Nothing. Forget it." "Eliza, I need to start dinner." She brushed past him, heading for the house. Luke caught her arm gently. "Wait." "Let me go, Luke." "Not until you hear me out." "There's nothing to hear. We had an agreement, a practical arrangement. You don't owe me anything beyond that." "And if I want to owe you more?" Eliza's breath caught. "What?" Luke forced himself to maintain eye contact, to not look away from the vulnerability in her face. "What if I want this to be more than an arrangement?" he said. "What if somewhere along the way, I started actually caring whether this works?" "You've known me 3 weeks, Luke." 3 weeks of watching you work yourself to exhaustion. 3 weeks of seeing you feed neighbors who probably gossip about you behind your back. 3 weeks of realizing that everything this town says about you is a damn lie. And I was stupid enough to believe it before I met you. Eliza's eyes searched his face. "You're scared. That's all this is. Marcus scared you into thinking you need to commit harder to the lie." "This isn't fear talking." "Then what is it?" Luke took a breath. "Truth. For the first time since we met. I care about you, Eliza. I don't know when it started or how to stop it, but it's there. And pretending it isn't, pretending this is still just business, it's making me crazy." Eliza pulled her arm free, wrapping it around herself protectively. "I can't do this." "Can't do what?" "Believe you. Hope. I've spent too many years hoping someone would see past what this town thinks of me. And every time I was wrong. Every time it hurt. I can't—" Her voice broke. "I can't survive hoping you're different if you're not." The words hit Luke like a physical blow. "What if I am different?" he asked softly. "Then prove it." Eliza met his eyes, her own swimming with unshed tears. "Not with words, not with defending me to Marcus Webb. Prove it by staying, by choosing this, choosing me when things get hard, when the novelty wears off and you remember I'm just the woman no one else wanted. You're not— I know what I am, Luke. The question is, do you? Really?" She walked into the house before he could answer. Luke stood there, the weight of her challenge settling over him like stone. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of their argument. Eliza thought he was acting out of guilt or fear or obligation. She didn't believe his feelings were real because she'd been hurt too many times before. And he had no idea how to prove her wrong. Near midnight, he heard footsteps in the hallway. Luke got up quietly and cracked open his door. Eliza stood at her bedroom window, silhouetted by moonlight. Even from a distance, he could see her shoulders shaking. She was crying. Because of him, because of what he'd said, because he'd made her hope when she'd spent years protecting herself from exactly that. Luke closed the door silently and sat on the edge of his bed. He'd thought he was being honest, brave even, but all he'd done was hurt the one person who'd given him a chance when he had nothing. The next morning, he found a note on the kitchen table. Gone to help Mrs. Morrison. Back by supper, E. Luke crumpled the note in his fist. She was avoiding him, and he deserved it. 2 days passed in painful silence. Eliza stayed busy, impossibly busy. She worked from dawn until well after dark, always finding another task that needed doing, another neighbor who needed help, another reason not to be in the same room with Luke. When they did cross paths, she was polite, distant, exactly how she'd been that first week before they'd started becoming friends. Luke hated it. On the third day, he rode into town, looking for a solution he couldn't name. He found it in the mercantile. Mrs. Chen was arranging fabric bolts when he walked in. "Mr. Callahan," she said, surprised. "What can I help you with?" Luke stood there, suddenly uncertain. I need advice." "Advice?" "About Eliza. About," he ran a hand through his hair, "about how to fix something I broke." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "What happened?" "I said something true, but she didn't believe me, and now she won't even look at me." "What did you say?" Luke hesitated. "That I care about her. That this marriage, it's not just business to me anymore." "And she didn't believe you?" "She thinks I'm lying, or confused, or feeling guilty. She told me to prove it." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "Smart woman, your wife." "I don't know how to prove it. I don't know what she needs from me." "Mr. Callahan," Mrs. Chen said gently, "Eliza has spent her entire adult life being told she's not enough. Not pretty enough, not young enough, not whatever enough. She's had men court her father's land while barely looking at her face. She's been a means to an end for everyone except maybe 3 people in this town. So when you, a man who married her for debt relief, suddenly claims to care, why on earth would she believe you?" The truth of it cut deep. "What do I do?" Luke asked quietly. "Show her. Consistently. Repeatedly. Without expectation of reward. Prove that you see her, really see her, when no one's watching, when there's no audience, when it doesn't benefit you at all." "How long will that take?" "As long as it takes. Love isn't a transaction, Mr. Callahan. It's a choice you make every single day." Luke left the mercantile with Mrs. Chen's words ringing in his ears. Choice. Daily. Consistent. He could do that. He would do that. That night he made dinner. It was simple. Beans and bacon. Cornbread that came out slightly burnt. But he'd cooked it himself. When Eliza came in from her evening chores, she stopped dead at the sight of the table set for 2. "What's this?" she asked carefully. "Dinner. Sit." "You cooked?" "Attempted to cook. Results may vary." Eliza sat slowly, suspicion written across her face. They ate in silence. The cornbread was definitely burnt, and the beans were undersalted. But Eliza ate every bite without complaint. When they finished, Luke started clearing the table. "I can do that," Eliza said. "I know. I'm doing it anyway." "Luke." "You were right," he interrupted, not looking at her. "The other day. You were right to ask for proof. Words are easy. Actions matter. So I'm going to show you. Every day. For as long as it takes. Show me what? That I meant what I said. That you matter to me. That this, he gestured between them, whatever this is or could be, I'm choosing it. Choosing you. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt. Because I want to. Eliza stood slowly. And if I can't believe you? Then I'll keep showing you until you can. Or until you tell me to stop. She studied his face for a long moment. Why? Because you deserve someone who fights for you. And I'm done pretending I don't want to be that person. Tears welled in Eliza's eyes again, but she blinked them back. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Okay, you can try. But Luke, her voice strengthened, if you're going to do this, you have to mean it. All the way. I can't survive another half-truth. No half-truths, Luke promised. Just me. Trying my damnedest not to screw this up. Something that might have been hope flickered across Eliza's face. And for the first time in 3 days, the weight in Luke's chest eased just slightly. Luke kept his word, and it was harder than he'd expected. The next morning, he woke before Eliza and started the coffee. When she came downstairs, surprise flickered across her face, but she didn't comment. She just poured herself a cup and sat at the table while he scrambled eggs. "Sleep all right?" he asked. "Well enough. You?" "Fine." They ate in careful silence, the air between them still fragile from the night before. After breakfast, Luke started for the door, then paused. "I'm riding out to check the north pasture. Should be back by lunch." Eliza looked up from the dishes. "You're telling me your plans now?" "Figured you might want to know where I am, in case you need me." Something softened in her expression. "All right, be safe." It was a small thing, barely a conversation, but Luke noticed the way her shoulders relaxed slightly, the way she almost smiled as he left. Small steps, daily choices. That's what Mrs. Chen had said. He could do this. 3 days later, Luke came back from town with a package wrapped in brown paper. Eliza was in the kitchen, preparing vegetables for supper. She eyed the package warily. "What's that?" Luke set it on the table. "Open it." "Luke, just open it." Eliza wiped her hands on her apron and carefully unwrapped the paper. Inside was a book, leather-bound, edges gilded, clearly expensive. "Wuthering Heights," she read aloud, her voice catching. "How did you—" "Mrs. Chen mentioned you'd been asking about it last month. Said they couldn't get it in. I sent a telegram to Denver, had it shipped." Eliza stared at the book, then at him. "This must have cost—" "Doesn't matter what it cost." "Luke, we can't afford—" "I used my own money. What was left from before the debt." He shifted uncomfortably. "You're always reading those old books of your mother's. Thought you might like something new." Eliza's fingers traced the embossed cover. "You didn't have to do this." "I know. I wanted to." She looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. "Thank you." Luke nodded and headed for the door, his chest tight. Behind him, he heard her whisper, "You're making this very difficult." He smiled, despite himself. Word spread faster than Luke anticipated. Within a week, half of Silver Creek knew Luke Callahan was courting his own wife. The gossip shifted from mockery to confusion to reluctant interest. "Saw him buying her flowers at the mercantile," one woman told another at the church social. "Fresh wildflowers. Said they were just because. And he fixed old Mrs. Peterson's porch. Did it for free. Said Eliza would want him to help. Heard he punched Marcus Webb for insulting her." No, he nearly punched him. Sarah Morrison broke it up. The stories grew with each telling, but the core truth remained. Luke Callahan was acting like a man in love with his wife. John Garrett heard the gossip too. Luke was repairing a fence post when Garrett's carriage pulled up to the property line. The banker climbed down, immaculate as always despite the dust. "Mr. Callahan, moment of your time?" Luke straightened slowly, hammer still in hand. "What can I do for you, Garrett?" "Just a friendly visit, checking on my investment. Your investment. The debt I forgave. Surely you haven't forgotten our arrangement." "I haven't forgotten anything," Garrett smiled, cold and calculating. "Good, because I've been hearing interesting things. About you and Mrs. Callahan. About this marriage becoming genuine. That bother you?" "On the contrary, it fascinates me. A man marries for debt relief, then discovers actual affection. It's almost romantic." "Get to the point, Garrett." The banker's smile faded. "The point is this. I want to make sure you understand the terms of our agreement. The debt was forgiven contingent on the marriage occurring, not on it lasting." Luke's grip tightened on the hammer. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if this marriage were to end, say, through divorce or annulment, the debt would be reinstated, in full, with interest accumulated from the original date." "That wasn't in the contract." "Read the fine print, Mr. Callahan. Clause 17, subsection B. The debt forgiveness is conditional on the marriage remaining legally valid for a minimum of 5 years. Luke's blood went cold. 5 years? Did you think I'd let you walk away after a few months? This was a long-term investment. Either you stay married to Eliza Harper for 5 years, or you owe me $4,000. Plus interest. That's extortion. That's business. Garrett climbed back into his carriage. "Enjoy your marital bliss, Mr. Callahan. You've got 4 years and 11 months left to serve." The carriage rolled away, leaving Luke standing there with rage burning through his veins. He didn't tell Eliza about Garrett's visit. Instead, he threw himself into work with ferocious intensity, trying to outrun the fury building inside him. He cleared brush until his hands bled, repaired every broken fence on the property, rebuilt the chicken coop from scratch. Eliza watched him with growing concern. "Luke, you need to rest," she said on the 3rd day. "You're going to hurt yourself." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've barely eaten. You haven't slept properly in days." "I said I'm fine." The words came out sharper than he intended. Eliza flinched. Luke cursed under his breath, setting down his tools. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap at you." "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just tired." "You're lying." Luke looked at her, saw the hurt in her eyes, and felt something break inside him. "Garrett came by," he said quietly. "Few days ago." "What did he want?" "To remind me of the terms. The debt forgiveness, it's not permanent. If we divorce or annul the marriage within 5 years, I owe him everything, with interest." Eliza went very still. 5 years? "Yeah. And you didn't tell me." "I didn't want you to think—" Luke stopped himself. "Think what? That you're only staying because of the debt? That all of this," she gestured between them, "is just you protecting yourself financially?" "It's not like that. Isn't it?" Eliza's voice was brittle. "You said you wanted to prove you cared, that you chose this. But now I find out you're trapped here legally. How am I supposed to believe anything you say?" "Because it's the truth. Yes, I'm trapped legally. But that's not why I'm here, Eliza. That's not why I'm trying." "How can I know that? How can you know that? Luke grabbed her shoulders gently, forcing her to look at him. Because if it was just about the money, I'd treat you like a business partner and nothing more. I'd do the bare minimum to keep this legal and keep my distance. But I'm not doing that. I'm courting you. I'm buying you books and fixing fences and learning how you take your coffee. I'm choosing to care about you. Garrett be damned. For 5 years, Luke. You have to stay for 5 years. Then I'll stay for 5 years. And after that, I'll stay because I want to. Because by then, you'll believe me. Eliza pulled away from his grip. You're asking me to wait 5 years to know if this is real? I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove it's real long before then. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can survive 5 years of wondering if you're here because you want to be or because you have to be. She walked away, leaving Luke standing in the yard with his heart in his throat. That night, Luke didn't go inside for supper. He sat in the barn, staring at nothing, trying to figure out how everything had fallen apart so quickly. He'd been making progress. Eliza had been softening, starting to trust him. And then Garrett had shown up and destroyed it all with one conversation. The barn door creaked open. Eliza stood there, silhouetted by lamplight from the house. You're missing supper, she said. Not hungry. I made pot roast, your favorite. How do you know it's my favorite? Because you always take 3 helpings when I make it. Eliza stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Luke, we need to talk. I don't have anything else to say. Well, I do, so you're going to listen. Luke looked up, surprised by the steel in her voice. Eliza sat down on a hay bale across from him. I've been thinking about what you said, about the 5 years, about Garrett's terms. Eliza, let me finish. You're right. If this was just about protecting yourself financially, you wouldn't be courting me. You wouldn't be trying at all. You'd do the legal minimum, and we'd live like strangers under the same roof. But that's not what's happening. No, it's not. But I also can't ignore the fact that you're legally bound to stay. That complicates everything. Because even if your feelings are genuine now, what happens in a year, 2 years, 5? What if you grow to resent me? What if you want to leave, but can't? Luke shook his head. That won't happen. You don't know that. Neither of us knows that. So what are you saying? We give up? Go back to being strangers? No. Eliza's voice softened. I'm saying we need to be honest about what this is. You're here partly by choice and partly by obligation. I need to accept that. And you need to accept that I might not be able to fully trust this until the 5 years are up, and you choose to stay anyway. That's a long time to live in doubt. I know, but it's the only way I can do this without losing myself completely. Luke studied her face, the vulnerability there, the fear, the fragile hope she was trying so hard to protect. All right, he said finally. We'll do it your way. But Eliza, I need you to know something. What? I'm not going to stop trying, even if you can't trust it yet, even if it takes 5 years. I'm going to keep showing up, keep choosing you, because that's what you deserve. Eliza's eyes glistened. Why? Because somewhere in the last month, you stopped being the woman I was forced to marry and became the woman I can't imagine leaving. And I don't care how long it takes for you to believe that. I'll wait. She stood up abruptly and walked to the door. Hand on the latch, she paused. Pot roast's getting cold, she said quietly. You should come eat. Then she was gone. Luke sat there for a long moment, then followed her into the house. They ate in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Less hostile, more thoughtful. And when Eliza accidentally brushed his hand reaching for the bread, she didn't pull away immediately. It was something. 2 weeks passed in uneasy equilibrium. Luke continued his daily efforts, cooking breakfast, helping with chores, finding small ways to ease Eliza's burden. She accepted his gestures with cautious gratitude, never quite letting her guard down, but not pushing him away either. Then Marcus Webb made his final mistake. It was market day in Silver Creek. Eliza had gone to town alone to sell eggs and buy supplies. Luke had stayed back to finish rebuilding the pasture gate. He was hammering in the last post when he heard hoofbeats. Sarah Morrison appeared, riding hard, her face flushed. "Luke, you need to come to town, now!" His stomach dropped. What happened? "It's Eliza. Marcus and his friends cornered her outside the mercantile. They're saying terrible things. She's holding her own, but—" Luke didn't wait to hear more. He grabbed his horse, barely remembering to saddle it, and rode for town like the devil himself was chasing him. He found them in front of the general store, Marcus and 3 other men surrounding Eliza, who stood with her back against the wall, chin raised defiantly. "Nothing but a business arrangement," Marcus was saying, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "You think he actually wants you? He's counting down the days until he can leave." "That's enough," Eliza said, her voice remarkably steady. "Is it, though? Because everyone knows the truth. You bought yourself a husband with land your daddy left. But you can't buy real affection. You can't make a man want—" Luke's fist connected with Marcus's jaw before the man could finish. Marcus went down hard, sprawling in the dirt. His friends backed up quickly, hands raised. Luke stood over Marcus, breathing hard, every muscle tense with rage. "Get up," he growled. Marcus touched his bleeding lip, eyes wide. "You're crazy. Get up." "Luke, don't!" Eliza's voice cut through the red haze. "He's not worth it." "He insulted you." "I've been insulted before. I'll be insulted again. Hitting him won't change that." Luke looked at her, saw the weariness in her eyes, and felt his rage shift into something deeper, something colder. He turned back to Marcus, who was struggling to his feet. "You want to know the truth?" Luke said, his voice carrying across the silent street. "You want to know why I married Eliza?" "Luke," Eliza started. "You're right. I was desperate. I was drowning in debt, and Garrett offered me a way out. I married her for all the wrong reasons." The crowd murmured. Eliza's face went pale. "But here's what you don't understand," Luke continued, his eyes locked on Marcus. "In the last 6 weeks, I've watched this woman work harder than any man I've ever known. I've seen her feed neighbors who can't feed themselves. I've watched her show kindness to people who've spent years treating her like garbage. And somewhere along the way, I realized something." He turned to look at Eliza, ignoring everyone else. "I realized that I married the strongest, most remarkable woman in this entire valley. And every single person who mocked her, who called her names, who made her feel less than, they're fools. Because she's worth 10 of any of us." Tears streamed down Eliza's face. "So yes, Marcus, I married her for the wrong reasons. But I'm staying for all the right ones. And if you or anyone else has a problem with that, you can take it up with me, directly." No one spoke. Luke walked to Eliza and held out his hand. She took it, trembling. "Let's go home," he said quietly. They walked to the wagon together, the crowd parting silently. Luke helped her up, then climbed beside her. As they pulled away from town, he heard someone start to clap. Then another person. Then another. By the time they reached the edge of town, half the street was applauding. They were a mile from home when Eliza finally spoke. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." "You told them the truth about why you married me." "They deserve to know. You deserve to have someone tell the truth, out loud." Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly he almost missed it. "Did you mean it? What you said about me?" Luke pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. "Every word. You want to know when I realized I was falling for you? It was the second week. You were delivering food to Mrs. Morrison, and her youngest son hugged you. And you smiled. Really smiled. For the first time since I'd met you. And I thought, this is what everyone else is missing. This is who she really is." "Luke, I know you don't fully trust this yet. I know the 5-year contract complicates everything. But I need you to know that what I feel for you, it's not obligation. It's not guilt. It's real. And it's terrifying. And I don't know how to make you believe me except to keep showing up every single day for as long as it takes." Eliza reached up and touched his face, her hand gentle against his cheek. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. I want to believe you so badly it hurts." "Then believe me. Take the leap." She searched his eyes for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, and over far too quickly. But when she pulled back, Luke saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Hope. Real, fragile, terrifying hope. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? I'll try. I'll try to believe you." Luke cupped her face in his hands. "That's all I'm asking." He kissed her again, longer this time, and felt her relax into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Eliza laughed, a small, surprised sound. "What?" Luke asked. "I just kissed my husband. For the first time since our wedding day." "Technically, we didn't kiss on our wedding day." "That's true. We should probably remedy that." This time, when he kissed her, she kissed him back with equal fervor. And for the first time since this whole mess started, Luke felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to be all right. They arrived home as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Luke helped Eliza down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist. She smiled up at him, shy and beautiful, and he felt his heart clench. "I should start supper," she said, but made no move to step away. "Or we could just stand here for a while." "People will talk. We've been gone for hours." "Let them talk." Eliza laughed again, and the sound filled something hollow inside Luke's chest. But their moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Luke turned to see John Garrett riding up the drive, flanked by 2 men Luke didn't recognize. One wore a marshal's badge. Eliza's hand tightened on Luke's arm. "What's he doing here?" Garrett dismounted, his expression unreadable. "Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, I apologize for the intrusion, but we have a matter that requires immediate attention." "What matter?" Luke asked, stepping slightly in front of Eliza. Garrett gestured to the marshal. "Marshal Crawford has some questions about the nature of your marriage. Specifically, whether it meets the legal requirements outlined in Mr. Harper's will." Luke's blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about proving that this marriage is legitimate, not a fraud designed to circumvent the will's stipulations." "On what grounds?" Eliza demanded, her voice sharp. "On the grounds that multiple witnesses have testified to the marriage being purely transactional. That you and Mr. Callahan maintain separate living quarters. That until very recently, you behaved like strangers rather than spouses." "Who testified?" Luke growled. "That's irrelevant. What matters is that if the marshal determines this marriage is fraudulent, the will becomes void. The land reverts to the bank. Marshal Crawford stepped forward, his expression apologetic. I'm sorry, folks. I know this is unpleasant, but I've been asked to conduct an investigation. I'll need to ask you both some questions. Separately. Eliza's face went white. Luke felt rage building in his chest, but forced it down. When? He asked. Now, if possible. The sooner we get this sorted, the better for everyone. Luke looked at Eliza, saw the fear in her eyes, and made a decision. Fine. Ask your questions. But know this, Marshal. Our marriage is legal and legitimate, and we're not losing this land. Garrett smiled, cold and triumphant, and Luke realized they were in the fight of their lives. Marshal Crawford gestured toward the house. Mrs. Callahan, I'd like to speak with you first. Alone. Luke's jaw clenched. She's not going anywhere without me. Mr. Callahan, I understand your concern, but separate interviews are standard procedure. If your marriage is legitimate, you have nothing to worry about. And if we refuse? Eliza asked, her voice steady despite her pale face. Then I'll be forced to assume you have something to hide. Crawford's tone was apologetic, but firm. Ma'am, please, I'm just doing my job. Eliza squeezed Luke's hand once, then let go. It's all right. I'll answer his questions. Eliza, I said it's all right. She met his eyes, and Luke saw steel there. We have nothing to hide. She walked toward the house, Crawford following. Garrett's second man, a thin, weasel-faced clerk, scurried after them with a notebook. Luke stood there, fists clenched, watching his wife disappear inside with strangers who held their entire future in their hands. Garrett lit a cigar, smiling. Nervous, Callahan? What's your game here, Garrett? Game? I'm simply ensuring the law is followed. Mr. Harper's will was very specific about the marriage requirement. If your union doesn't meet those specifications, well, he shrugged. The land reverts to its rightful owner. Rightful owner being you? The bank holds the lien, yes. Luke stepped closer, lowering his voice. You orchestrated this whole thing. You forced us into this marriage, knowing we'd struggle to make it look real. You've been waiting for this moment. I've been protecting my interests, as any good businessman would. You're not a businessman. You're a snake. Garrett's smile widened. Perhaps, but I'm a snake who's about to own the richest farmland in the valley. Unless, of course, your wife can convince the marshal that your marriage is genuine. Can she do that, Callahan? Can she lie convincingly enough to save your hides? Luke's fist pulled back, ready to wipe that smirk off Garrett's face. I wouldn't, Garrett said calmly. Assaulting me in front of a federal marshal would only strengthen my case. Luke forced his hand to unclench. Every muscle in his body screamed to hit something. But Garrett was right. Any wrong move now could destroy everything. Inside the house, Eliza sat at her own kitchen table, feeling like a stranger. Marshal Crawford settled across from her, his expression kind but professional. The clerk positioned himself in the corner, pencil poised. Mrs. Callahan, I appreciate your cooperation. I know this is uncomfortable. Just ask your questions, Marshal. Crawford pulled out a folded document. I've received testimony from several Silver Creek residents, claiming your marriage to Luke Callahan is fraudulent, that it was arranged purely to satisfy your father's will and allow Mr. Callahan to escape his debts. Is that accurate? Eliza's throat tightened. My marriage is legal. We were wed by a licensed minister with witnesses present. That's not what I asked. Was the marriage arranged for financial purposes? She chose her words carefully. My father's will required me to marry within 6 months of his death. Luke needed relief from debts he couldn't pay. Those facts are true. So you married for mutual financial benefit, not love? I married because the law required it. What I felt or didn't feel wasn't relevant at the time. And now? What do you feel now? Eliza met his eyes. Now I feel like my privacy is being violated. My marriage is legal. Whether it began from love or necessity shouldn't matter. Crawford sighed. Unfortunately, it does matter. Your father's will specifically states the marriage must be entered into in good faith with intent to create a lasting union. A purely transactional arrangement doesn't meet that standard. Who decides what counts as good faith? You? The court, based on evidence. Crawford leaned forward. Mrs. Callahan, I'm not the enemy here. I'm trying to establish facts. Now, I've been told you and your husband maintain separate bedrooms. Is that true? Heat flooded Eliza's cheeks. We did, initially. Initially? We married as strangers, Marshall. We needed time to adjust. And have you adjusted? Are you sharing a bedroom now? That's none of your business. I'm afraid it is. The law requires a legal marriage, which I have. Whether my husband and I share intimate details with you is not part of any legal requirement. Crawford sat back, studying her. You're protecting him. I'm protecting my marriage. Why? If this is just a business arrangement, why fight so hard? Eliza's hands trembled in her lap, but she kept her voice steady. Because this is my home, my family's land, and Luke is my husband. Whatever our reasons for marrying, we made vows. We made a commitment. That matters. Even if those vows were lies, they weren't lies. The words came out stronger than she intended. Maybe they weren't based on love at first, but they were real. They meant something. And what we've built since then, that's real too. The clerk scribbled frantically. Crawford watched her for a long moment. You care about him. It wasn't a question, but Eliza answered anyway. Yes, I do. Does he care about you? You'll have to ask him that yourself. Outside, Luke paced like a caged animal. 20 minutes had passed, then 30. Every minute felt like an hour. Garrett had retreated to his carriage, but Luke could feel the man's eyes on him, watching, waiting. Finally, the door opened. Eliza emerged, her face unreadable. Crawford followed, gesturing to Luke. Your turn, Mr. Callahan. Luke caught Eliza's eye. She gave him the smallest nod, a signal he couldn't quite interpret. Trust me? Be careful? He had no idea. He walked into his own house, feeling like a condemned man. Crawford didn't waste time. Mr. Callahan, let's be direct. Why did you marry Eliza Harper? To erase my debt. The honesty seemed to catch Crawford off guard. You're not going to pretend otherwise? What's the point? Everyone in this town knows why I married her. Lying about it now would just make me look worse. So you admit the marriage was fraudulent? No. I admit it started for the wrong reasons. That's not the same thing. Explain the difference. Luke sat down heavily. I married Eliza because John Garrett offered me a deal. Marry her, debt disappears. I was desperate. She needed a husband to keep her land. We both got what we needed. That's fraud, Mr. Callahan. It's practical. And it was legal. We said vows in front of a preacher and signed papers. Nothing fraudulent about that. Crawford leaned forward. But you didn't intend to create a real marriage. You intended to use the legal system to benefit yourselves. We intended to survive. Is that a crime? It is if the marriage is a sham. It's not a sham. Luke's voice hardened. Was it purely practical at the start? Yes. Did we know each other? No. But we made a commitment, and we've honored it. Have you? I've been told you slept in the barn for weeks, that you and your wife barely spoke, that the whole town knew it was an arrangement. Things change.
When? When did things change?
Luke thought about Eliza bringing him coffee in the mornings, about watching her fix fences alone, about the way she smiled when she didn't know he was looking. Gradually, he said quietly. I can't point to one moment. It just happened. I started seeing who she really was. Not the woman the town talked about. Not the old maid nobody wanted. The real Eliza. And the more I saw, the more I... He stopped. The more you what? The more I realized I'd married someone extraordinary. Someone worth fighting for. Crawford studied him. You love her? Yes. When did you realize that? Does it matter? For the legal determination? Yes. If you fell in love after the marriage, that suggests the original intent was fraudulent. Luke shook his head. That's insane. You're saying people can't grow to love each other? That every marriage has to start with romance? I'm saying your father-in-law's will required good faith intent. If you married her with no intention of creating a real marriage, I married her with every intention of honoring our agreement. What I felt about her personally wasn't part of that agreement. But feelings change. People change. We changed. Conveniently, right when your marriage comes under scrutiny. Luke's temper flared. You think this is convenient? Having a federal marshal interrogate me about my private life? Having my marriage questioned because some banker wants my wife's land? There's nothing convenient about any of this. Then help me understand. Give me something concrete. When did you move out of the barn? 2 weeks ago. Into her bedroom? Into the guest room. Then... Luke hesitated. Then what? Then 3 days ago, she asked me to stay with her, in her room, as her husband. The clerk's pencil scratched loudly. Crawford's expression shifted slightly. Before or after you heard about this investigation? Before. We didn't know Garrett was planning this. Can anyone verify that? It's our private life. We don't need witnesses. Unfortunately, you do, if you want to prove this marriage is legitimate. Luke leaned across the table. Let me ask you something, Marshal. What would constitute proof for you? What evidence would convince you our marriage is real? Crawford didn't answer immediately. I don't know, he admitted finally. That's what makes this difficult. How do you prove love? How do you prove intent? I can only look at actions and testimony. Then look at our actions. I work this farm dawn to dusk. I provide for my wife. I defend her name when people insult her. I'm building a life here, not running a con. Or you're protecting your investment. 5 years, Mr. Callahan. That's how long the debt forgiveness lasts. 5 years of playing house and you're free and clear. The words hit like a physical blow because they were exactly what Eliza feared.
If that's all this was, Luke said slowly, I'd do the minimum. Keep my head down, stay out of town, avoid making waves. But that's not what I'm doing. I stood in the middle of Silver Creek today and told the whole town I love my wife. I punched Marcus Webb for insulting her. I bought her books and flowers and fixed her neighbors' porches. Does that sound like someone counting down the days until he can leave? Crawford sat back. It sounds like someone who realized he needed to make the marriage look real once the stakes got high. Luke stood abruptly. We're done here. Mr. Callahan, I said we're done. You want to take this to court? Fine. Get a judge. Get a jury. But I'm not sitting here defending my marriage to a man who's already decided we're guilty. He walked out before Crawford could respond. Eliza stood near the porch, her arms wrapped around herself. Luke went straight to her. How bad? He asked quietly. I don't know. He asked about our sleeping arrangements, our feelings, whether the marriage was consummated. Luke's jaw clenched. He had no right. He has every right if Garrett's allegations are true. Eliza's voice shook. Luke, what if we can't prove this? What if the court decides? They won't. You don't know that. I know I'm not letting Garrett take this from you. Crawford emerged from the house, the clerk trailing behind. He approached Garrett's carriage, and the two men conferred in low voices. Finally, Crawford turned back to Luke and Eliza. I'll file my preliminary report tomorrow. The court will review it and determine if there's sufficient cause for further investigation. You'll be notified of their decision within a week. And until then, Luke asked. Until then, you continue as you have been. Don't leave the county. Don't make any changes to the property or the marriage. Crawford's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I believe you care about each other. But the law isn't based on belief. It's based on evidence. And right now, the evidence is complicated. He mounted his horse and rode away. Garrett climbed into his carriage, smiling. See you soon, Mrs. Callahan. Or should I say, Miss Harper. The carriage rolled away, leaving Luke and Eliza standing in the yard as twilight settled around them. We're going to lose, Eliza whispered. We're going to lose everything. Luke pulled her into his arms. No, we're not. How can you be so sure? Because I won't let it happen. She pulled back to look at him. You can't promise that. This isn't something you can fix by working harder or fighting someone. This is the law. Then we'll fight the law. We'll get our own lawyer. We'll bring in witnesses. We'll prove... Prove what? That we fell in love after we married? That won't matter if the court decides our original intent was fraudulent. Everything we've built, everything we've become, it won't matter if they decide the foundation was rotten. Luke cupped her face in his hands. Listen to me. We are not rotten. This marriage isn't rotten. Yeah, it started wrong. Yeah, we had the wrong reasons. But we made something real out of it, something good. And I'll be damned if I let Garrett or anyone else take that away. Tears streamed down Eliza's face. I'm scared. I know. So am I. What do we do? Before Luke could answer, hoofbeats sounded again. But this time, it wasn't Garrett returning. It was Sarah Morrison, riding hard, with Alice Thompson and Mrs. Chen following close behind. Behind them came old Mr. Peterson in his wagon, and Mary Chen on foot, and half a dozen other townspeople Luke recognized from church. Sarah dismounted quickly. We heard what happened. The whole town's talking about the marshal's visit. Word travels fast, Luke said bitterly. It does, and we're here to help. Eliza stared at the gathering crowd. Help how? Alice Thompson stepped forward. By testifying. If this goes to court, you'll need witnesses who can speak to the legitimacy of your marriage. We can do that. You barely know us, Eliza said, her voice breaking. We know enough, Mrs. Peterson said firmly. We know you delivered food to our family every week for 3 years, Eliza Harper. We know you sat with my husband when he was dying, reading to him when I was too exhausted to keep my eyes open. And we know Luke Callahan fixed my roof in the rain without being asked, Mr. Peterson added, because Eliza mentioned it needed doing. That's not the behavior of a man playing a part. Sarah took Eliza's hands. You've carried this town on your shoulders for years. Let us carry you for once. More people spoke up, stories of kindness, of help freely given, of a marriage that might have started wrong but had grown into something real. Luke felt his throat tighten. These people, many of whom had mocked Eliza for years, were now standing in her defense. Why? He asked hoarsely. Why now? Because we were wrong about her, Alice said simply. And because what you said in town today, about the wrong reasons to marry and the right reasons to stay,
That was the truth. We all saw it. Mrs. Chen smiled. Besides, watching you two fall in love while pretending you hadn't has been the best entertainment Silver Creek's had in years. We're not about to let John Garrett ruin the ending. Despite everything, Eliza laughed, a wet, broken sound. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you all." The crowd stayed for another hour, making plans, discussing strategy, writing down dates and incidents that could serve as testimony. By the time they left, Luke and Eliza had a list of 20 potential witnesses and a renewed sense of hope. But when the last wagon pulled away and they were alone again, reality settled back in. "It might not be enough," Eliza said quietly. "I know. Garrett has money, influence. He'll bring his own witnesses. He'll twist everything to look fraudulent." "Let him try." Eliza turned to Luke, her eyes searching his face. "If we lose, if the court takes the land, what happens to us?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. "What do you mean?" Luke asked carefully. "I mean, if we lose the land, you lose nothing. The debt's already forgiven. That's not contingent on keeping the property. You'd be free to leave, start over somewhere else. You wouldn't be tied to me anymore." Luke's heart stopped. "You think I'd leave?" "I think you'd have every right to. This wasn't what you signed up for. Fighting court battles, having your privacy invaded, risking everything for land that isn't even yours." "It is mine." Luke grabbed her shoulders. "You said it yourself. We're married. What's yours is mine. What's mine is yours. That's how this works." "Luke, do you want me to leave? Is that what you're trying to say?" "No, I'm trying to give you an out. I don't want an out." Luke's voice rose. "When are you going to understand that? I don't want to leave. I don't want to start over. I want this. I want you. I want our life here, our farm, our future, all of it. Even if we lose everything?" "We won't lose everything. We'll still have each other." Eliza's face crumpled. "That's not enough. Not for you. You deserve—" "Don't tell me what I deserve. I deserve exactly what I've got. A second chance with a woman far better than I ever hoped for. And I'm not walking away from that. Not for Garrett, not for the court, not for anything." He kissed her then, hard and desperate, trying to pour every ounce of certainty into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Eliza whispered, "If we lose the land, we lose our home." "Then we'll build a new one, together." "Where?" "I don't know. Somewhere, anywhere. As long as we're together, that's home." She searched his eyes, looking for doubt, for hesitation. She found none. "You really mean that?" she said wonderingly. "Every word. Even knowing you might end up with nothing?" "I'd have you. That's not nothing." Eliza kissed him again, softer this time, and Luke felt something shift between them, the last wall crumbling, the last defense falling away. When she pulled back, her eyes were clear, resolved. "Then we fight," she said. "We fight for this land, for this life. Together." "Together," Luke agreed. They stood there in the darkening yard, holding each other, and Luke silently swore that whatever came next, court battles, investigations, Garrett schemes, they'd face it side by side. But even as he made that promise, a cold dread settled in his stomach, because he knew John Garrett wouldn't stop. The banker had too much invested, too much to gain, and men like that didn't quit until they got what they wanted, or until someone made them quit. The week that followed was the longest of Luke's life. He and Eliza spent every waking hour preparing for the court hearing, gathering documents, organizing witness testimony, searching for anything that might prove their marriage was legitimate in the eyes of the law. On the third day, Luke rode to the county seat to meet with a lawyer. Thomas Mitchell was young but sharp, with a reputation for taking on cases no one else would touch. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Callahan," Mitchell said after reviewing the case. "This is an uphill battle. Your original intent matters, and from what you've told me, your original intent was purely transactional." "But we've built a real marriage since then. That has to count for something." "It does, but Garrett's arguing the will required good faith from the beginning. That any marriage entered into solely to satisfy the inheritance clause is fraudulent, regardless of what happened after." Luke's stomach sank. "So, we're done?" "Not necessarily. If we can prove Garrett manipulated the situation, coerced you into the marriage through illegal debt collection or misrepresentation, we might be able to argue he's the fraudulent party, not you." "How do we prove that?" Mitchell tapped his pen against the desk. "We need his records, his contract with you, any correspondence about the arrangement, anything showing he orchestrated this marriage specifically to create grounds for later challenge." "He's not going to hand those over." "No, but the court can subpoena them, if we file the right motions." Luke leaned forward. "Do it. File whatever you need to file. I want every piece of paper that man has on me and my wife." Mitchell smiled grimly. "Now we're talking." Back at the farm, Eliza was conducting her own investigation. She'd spent the morning going through her father's papers, looking for anything that might help their case. Most of it was routine: land deeds, crop records, bills of sale. But buried in the bottom drawer of his desk, she found something that made her blood run cold. A letter, dated 3 months before her father's death. She read it twice, her hands shaking. Then she rode straight to town. She found Sarah Morrison at the schoolhouse, helping Alice Thompson clean the classroom. "Sarah, I need to ask you something. About my father." Sarah set down her broom. "What about him?" "Did he ever mention John Garrett to you, in the months before he died?" Sarah's expression shifted. "Why do you ask?" "Please, it's important." Sarah exchanged a glance with Alice, then nodded. "He mentioned him once. Said Garrett had been pressuring him to sell the farm. Your father refused. He was furious about it." "Did he say why Garrett wanted the land?" "Something about the railroad. The proposed route runs right through your property. Whoever owns that land could negotiate passage fees, potentially worth thousands." Eliza's breath caught. "The railroad." "Eliza, what's this about?" But Eliza was already running for her horse. She made it home in record time, bursting into the house where Luke was reviewing papers with Mitchell. "The railroad!" she gasped, breathless. "It's about the railroad!" Both men looked up. "What are you talking about?" Luke asked. Eliza pulled the letter from her pocket. "I found this in my father's desk. It's from Garrett, dated 3 months before my father died. He's offering to buy the land for a fraction of its value. When my father refused, Garrett threatened him." Mitchell took the letter, reading quickly. His eyes widened. "This is it." "What?" Luke moved to read over his shoulder. "This proves motive. Garrett wanted the land. Your father wouldn't sell. So Garrett waited until he died, then manipulated the situation to get it another way." "By forcing me and Luke into a marriage he knew would be questionable?" Eliza said. "He set us up to fail." Luke's hands clenched into fists. "That son of a—" "This changes everything," Mitchell interrupted. "If we can prove Garrett knowingly created a fraudulent situation, the court will throw out his challenge. The marriage stands. The land stays with you." "But how do we prove he knew what he was doing?" Eliza asked. "We get his records, All of them. And we find the paper trail. The hearing was set for Friday morning. Luke barely slept the night before. He lay in bed, their bed now, listening to Eliza's breathing, trying to memorize the sound in case this was their last night together in this house. "You're thinking too loud," Eliza murmured. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." She rolled over to face him. "I'm scared." "Me too." "What if Mitchell's wrong? What if the letter isn't enough?" Luke pulled her closer. "Then we start over. We'll find another farm, another home, but we'll do it together." "I don't want another home. I want this one." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "Luke, if we win, if we keep the land and the court validates the marriage, what happens then?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you'll have fulfilled your obligation. 5 years or not, if the court says our marriage is legitimate, Garrett can't touch the debt forgiveness. You'd be free." Luke pulled back to look at her. "Free to what?" "To leave. To decide if you really want this, or if you just got caught up in fighting for it." "Eliza, I need to know, Luke. When the fight is over and the dust settles, will you still want me? Or will you realize you were just defending your pride?" Luke cupped her face in his hands. "You want to know what I want?" "Yes. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to fight with you over whose turn it is to feed the chickens. I want to watch you deliver food to neighbors who don't deserve your kindness. I want to grow old on this farm, with you, building something that lasts. That's what I want. Not because Garrett pushed me into it. Not because of a debt or a will or any legal obligation. Because you're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I'm done pretending otherwise." Tears streamed down Eliza's face. "You promise?" "I promise. Win or lose tomorrow, I'm yours. Completely." She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and they held each other until dawn. The courthouse was packed. Half of Silver Creek had turned out, filling the gallery seats and spilling into the hallway. Luke recognized faces, some friendly, some hostile, most just curious. John Garrett sat at the plaintiff's table, immaculate and confident, flanked by 2 expensive lawyers. Luke and Eliza sat with Mitchell, their joined hands visible to everyone. Judge Harrison took the bench, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for fairness and zero tolerance for nonsense. "This is a hearing to determine the validity of the marriage between Lucas Callahan and Eliza Harper Callahan," she began. "Mr. Garrett, as the petitioner, you may present your case." Garrett's lead attorney stood, smooth and practiced. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate that this marriage was entered into fraudulently, with the sole purpose of circumventing the late Mr. Harper's will. We have witnesses who will testify to the purely transactional nature of this union." He called Marcus Webb first. Marcus took the stand, shooting a nervous glance at Luke. "Mr. Webb, how long have you known the defendant, Mr. Callahan?" "Few years. We've had run-ins." "And what was his reputation before this marriage?" "He was a cowboy, drifter type, always short on money, long on talk." "And when you heard he was marrying Miss Harper, what was your reaction?" Marcus hesitated. "Thought it was strange. Everyone did. Luke never showed interest in settling down. Then suddenly he's married to a woman he barely knew." "Did Mr. Callahan ever admit to you that the marriage was arranged?" "Not directly, but it was obvious. Everyone knew about his debt. Everyone knew about her father's will." "Thank you. No further questions." Mitchell stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Webb, you and Mr. Callahan had an altercation recently, did you not?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "We had words. You insulted his wife publicly, and he defended her. Physically, if I'm not mistaken. He assaulted me. He defended his wife's honor against your crude remarks. That doesn't sound like a man in a fake marriage, does it? Objection, Garrett's lawyer called. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Harrison said. Mr. Mitchell, stick to facts. No further questions, Your Honor. 2 more witnesses testified for Garrett, both claiming the marriage was obviously fraudulent, both contradicted on cross-examination. Then Mitchell called his witnesses. Sarah Morrison testified about the food deliveries, the genuine care she'd seen develop between Luke and Eliza. Mrs. Chen described the books Luke bought, the small kindnesses he showed. Old Mr. Peterson talked about the roof repair done in rain because that's what a man does for his wife's friends. One by one, they painted a picture of a marriage that might have started wrong, but had become real. Then Mitchell dropped his bomb. Your Honor, I'd like to submit new evidence. A letter from John Garrett to the late Mr. Harper, dated 3 months before his death. Garrett's face went white. Mitchell presented the letter. This letter shows Mr. Garrett attempting to purchase the Harper land for well below market value, with threats implied if Mr. Harper refused to sell. I believe it establishes motive for Mr. Garrett to manipulate this entire situation. Judge Harrison read the letter carefully. Mr. Garrett, did you write this? Garrett stood. Your Honor, that letter was a simple business proposal. That's not what I asked. Did you write it? Yes, but... And did you threaten Mr. Harper if he refused to sell? I merely stated consequences. The railroad route was uncertain. If he waited too long, the value would decrease. That sounds like a threat to me. Harrison's voice was ice. Mr. Mitchell, what's your point with this evidence? My point is that Mr. Garrett has been trying to acquire this land for months. When Mr. Harper refused to sell, Mr. Garrett waited until he died, then manufactured a situation designed to fail. He pushed Mr. Callahan into a hasty marriage, knowing it could be challenged later, giving him grounds to seize the property. That's absurd, Garrett's lawyer objected. Pure speculation. Is it? Mitchell turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to call John Garrett to the stand. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Harrison banged her gavel. Order! Mr. Garrett, take the stand. Garrett approached slowly, his confidence cracking. Mitchell didn't waste time. Mr. Garrett, you hold the lien on the Harper property, correct? The bank holds the lien. I manage the bank's interests. And if the Harper property reverts to the bank, who benefits financially? The bank's investors, of which you are the primary investor, are you not? Garrett's jaw tightened. I own shares, yes. 60% of shares, according to public records. So if you acquire the Harper land, you personally stand to gain thousands from the railroad deal, don't you? That's not... Answer the question, Mr. Garrett. Yes. If the land reverts to the bank and we sell to the railroad, I would profit. So would every other shareholder. Mitchell smiled coldly. And when you offered Mr. Callahan debt forgiveness in exchange for marrying Miss Harper, did you explain the 5-year stipulation? It was in the contract. Did you explain it? Verbally? In clear terms? Garrett hesitated. The contract was available for review. Mr. Callahan has testified he didn't read the full contract, that you rushed him into signing. Is that accurate? I can't control whether people read before they sign. But you were counting on him not reading, weren't you? You were counting on this marriage being questionable so you could challenge it later and take the land. Objection! Garrett's lawyer was on his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. I'm establishing motive, Mitchell countered. Judge Harrison studied Garrett carefully. I'll allow it. Mr. Garrett, answer the question. Garrett's face flushed. I offered Mr. Callahan a fair deal. What he chose to do with it was his business. A fair deal that included a 5-year clause you failed to explain. A fair deal that would give you grounds to challenge the marriage and seize valuable land. That's not fairness, Mr. Garrett. That's fraud." The courtroom exploded. Judge Harrison banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order! I will have order!" When the room finally quieted, she turned to Garrett. "Mr. Garrett, did you or did you not deliberately structure this arrangement to benefit yourself at the expense of the Callahans?" Garrett opened his mouth, then closed it. "Answer the question." I acted in the bank's best interests." "That's not an answer." "Yes." The word came out barely above a whisper. "Yes, I structured it knowing there might be grounds for challenge. But that doesn't make their marriage legitimate. They still married for the wrong reasons." "Perhaps," Harrison said, "but you manufactured those reasons. You created the situation specifically to exploit it later. That makes you the fraudulent party, not them." She turned to the gallery, her expression stern. "I've heard enough. Based on the evidence presented, I find that John Garrett manipulated both Lucas Callahan and Eliza Harper into a marriage he intended to challenge for personal financial gain. That constitutes fraud on the part of Mr. Garrett, not the defendants." Luke's heart stopped. "Furthermore," Harrison continued, "I find that regardless of the marriage's origins, substantial evidence shows it has become a genuine union. The testimony of community members, the defendants' own statements and actions, and the clear emotional bond between them all support the conclusion that this is a real marriage." Eliza's hand tightened on Luke's. "Therefore, I rule in favor of the defendants. The marriage between Lucas Callahan and Eliza Harper Callahan is hereby declared valid and legitimate. The land remains in Mrs. Callahan's possession. Mr. Garrett, your petition is denied." The gavel came down with finality. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Luke pulled Eliza into his arms, holding her as she sobbed with relief. Around them, their neighbors celebrated, shouting congratulations. Garrett stood frozen, his face ashen. His lawyers were already gathering their papers, distancing themselves from the disaster. Judge Harrison wasn't finished. "One more thing, Mr. Garrett. I'm referring this case to the territorial prosecutor for investigation into possible criminal fraud. You may want to retain counsel." Garrett stumbled out of the courtroom without a word. Outside, the celebration continued. People Luke barely knew clapped him on the back. Women hugged Eliza. Someone started singing. It was chaos and joy and relief, all mixed together. Sarah Morrison pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "You did it! You actually did it!" Eliza laughed through her tears. "We couldn't have done it without all of you." "Nonsense! You two did this yourselves. We just told the truth." Mitchell appeared at Luke's elbow. "Congratulations, Mr. Callahan, though I have to say, that was closer than I'd have liked." "But we won." "You won. The land is secure. The marriage is valid. Garrett is finished in this county." Mitchell grinned. "I'd say that's a pretty good day's work." Luke shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for everything." "My pleasure. Something tells me you two are going to do good things with that land." As the crowd began to disperse, Luke and Eliza made their way to their wagon. But before they could leave, a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Callahan! Mrs. Callahan!" They turned to find Marshal Crawford approaching. Luke tensed instinctively, but Crawford was smiling. "I wanted to apologize," the marshal said, "for the investigation, for doubting you. Judge Harrison was right. Garrett played us all." "You were doing your job," Eliza said graciously. "Maybe, but I should have seen through his scheme earlier. For what it's worth, I think you two are the real thing. Anyone with eyes could see it in that courtroom." He tipped his hat and walked away. Luke helped Eliza into the wagon, then climbed up beside her. As they pulled away from town, the cheers finally fading behind them, a strange quiet settled over them both. They were halfway home when Eliza finally spoke. "It's over." "Yeah, it's over." "We won. We get to keep everything." "We do." She turned to look at him. "So now what?" Luke pulled the wagon to a stop, the same spot where he'd kissed her weeks ago, and turned to face his wife. "Now we build the life we almost lost. We work this farm. We raise crops. Maybe someday we'll raise kids. We'll fight and make up and grow old together. And every single day, I'm going to choose you. Not because of a contract or a debt or a will. Because you're mine and I'm yours, and that's all that matters." Eliza's eyes filled with tears again. "That's all I ever wanted to hear." "Then hear this, too. I love you, Eliza Callahan. I love your strength and your kindness and your stubborn refusal to let this town break you. I love the way you wake before dawn and the way you read by candlelight. I love that you married a stranger and turned him into the luckiest man alive." "Luke." "I'm not finished. We started this marriage all wrong. We had every reason to fail. But we didn't. We fought for each other when no one thought we would. We built something real out of nothing. And now we get to keep it. Together." Eliza launched herself into his arms, kissing him with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she whispered, "I love you too. So much it terrifies me." "Don't be terrified. Be sure, because I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "I promise. For better or worse, richer or poorer, till death do us part." I meant those vows, Eliza. All of them. She pressed her forehead to his. "So did I. I just didn't know it at the time." They sat there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the future stretching out before them, bright and certain. Finally, Luke picked up the reins. "Let's go home." "Home," Eliza repeated, smiling. "I like the sound of that." As they rode toward the farm, their farm, Luke thought about everything that had brought them here. The desperation, the fear, the slow, terrifying fall into love, the fight to keep what they'd built. And he realized something. The town had called Eliza the old maid no one wanted. They'd said Luke married her out of obligation. They'd mocked and judged and whispered. But they'd all been wrong. Because the woman beside him, the one who'd shown him what real strength looked like, who'd taught him that love was a choice made daily, who'd fought beside him when everything was on the line. She wasn't unwanted. She was extraordinary. And he'd been the first one lucky enough to see it. 6 months later, Silver Creek witnessed something no one expected. The quiet farm on the edge of town had become the most prosperous spread in the valley. Luke and Eliza worked it together, equal partners in every sense. They'd expanded the house, hired 2 hands, and started breeding horses that people traveled from 3 counties to buy. But more than that, they'd become a fixture in the community. Luke helped his neighbors with repairs. Eliza continued her food deliveries. Together, they hosted dinners that brought people together, healing old wounds and building new friendships. John Garrett had disappeared after the trial, his bank seized by federal authorities investigating his fraudulent practices. The railroad deal had gone to another landowner, but Luke and Eliza didn't care. They had what they needed. On a warm Sunday morning, they rode into town for church together. As they climbed down from the wagon, Eliza's hand found Luke's, their fingers intertwining automatically. Sarah Morrison approached with her children. "Morning, you two. You look happy." "We are," Eliza said simply. And it was true. As they walked into church, heads turned. But this time, There were no whispers, no mockery, just nods of respect and genuine smiles. Because Silver Creek had finally learned what Luke knew from the start, that real worth had nothing to do with age or appearance or what people said. It had everything to do with character. And Eliza Callahan had more character in her little finger than most people have in their whole body. After the service, as people filed out into the sunshine, the new minister, a kind man who'd replaced the old preacher, made an announcement. "Before everyone leaves, I wanted to share something. The Callahans have made a generous donation to repair the church roof and fund a new school building. Thanks to their kindness, our children will have a proper place to learn." Applause rippled through the crowd. Eliza blushed, uncomfortable with the attention. Luke squeezed her hand. "You didn't have to do that," Sarah said quietly. "We wanted to," Luke replied. "This town gave us a second chance. Seemed right to give something back." As they walked back to their wagon, hand in hand, Luke thought about how far they'd come. From strangers forced together by circumstance to partners who'd fought for their right to stay together. From a marriage of convenience to a love that had survived scrutiny, doubt, and legal battles. From two broken people to one unbreakable team. Eliza looked up at him, the afternoon sun catching gold in her hair. "What are you thinking about?" "How lucky I am." "To keep the farm?" "To keep you." She smiled, that real, genuine smile he'd first seen months ago and had been chasing ever since. "The farm's nice too, though." Luke laughed. "Yeah, the farm's nice too." They climbed into the wagon, ready to head home. As Luke picked up the reins, Eliza leaned against his shoulder. "Luke?" "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For falling first. For fighting for us when I was too scared to believe. For proving that the cowboy forced to marry the town's old maid could become the man who loved her most." Luke kissed the top of her head. "I didn't fall first, Eliza. We fell together. We just didn't realize it at the same time." As they rode away from Silver Creek toward the home they'd built and the life they'd fought for, one truth remained absolutely certain. Love wasn't about perfect beginnings or easy choices. And the strongest marriages weren't built on romance alone, but on the daily decision to choose each other, fight for each other, and believe in each other when no one else would.